that is strange. Okay. So before I start the lecture, we have like 2 more minutes before 12:30. Can anyone tell me what are these times and dates that Riley and Sydney are writing there? Yes. So what does that mean? So these times and locations. So it's for you, right, to attend them. And it's, every session they just come here and then write these numbers, and sometimes, when we repeat something several times, maybe it loses its value or people don't pay attention. But these sessions are for you guys to attend and seek out extra help. And I'm giving Sydney and Riley each session your homework assignments and your quizzes, your exam problems, so they'll have all this information. And they solve for you really similar problems to your homework problems. And even I told them for like homework problems specifically, I'm not too strict because I literally ask from the PowerPoints. So I teach you something and literally on Fridays I go home, look at the slides and design questions. So I told them, even if they tell you that you have a question about definition of hypothesis in your homework assignment, it's not the biggest deal because I told you already that in the classes. So if you go to SI Pass, it's really high chance, or maybe like 100% chance that you see the exact problems of your homework assignment. So if you see that you're struggling with homework assignments, or some specifically, now it becomes more mathematical, the course. You saw from scientific notation, significant figures, and as it goes along, the course becomes more and more, intense. So it needs your attention and participation in the course, So far, even if you didn't study at home, maybe if you just, listen to the lecture during the class time, you would learn the definitions and then you can do great on the homework assignments. But from now on, you should start, studying at home too. And I was telling that to my students that for each hour or like each 50 minutes that you sit in the classroom, you should study 1 hour at home. So you also can devote that time to SI Pass and go there, and you can ask them any question that you have. They go through all the materials. So I think it's a really great resource for you all. And there are like several sections, and I think at least one of them will work for all of you. So who cannot attend any of these sessions? So I don't see any hands, right? So none of them?
No, I wasn't.
Okay, so if you want to take advantage of this opportunity, just email me, and you can also schedule appointments with tutoring, with tutors. You have like more sessions there. But overall, if none of these things or tutoring works for you, just email me, and I schedule tutoring sessions with you myself. So what I'm saying is that don't let the time conflict prevent you from learning. I'm more than happy to schedule times for you guys outside my office hours, outside of the class time, to make sure all of you learn. And just a reminder, your lab sessions started, and already we had 3 sessions yesterday, and we have like 1 session today, 2 sessions tomorrow, and 1 session on Friday. So if you missed your lab session and you didn't email me and your TA and to schedule a makeup lab. Does that make sense? And I'm going to talk, about the lab session during the sessions. So I don't want to devote more of the time talking about the labs. But just as a reminder, again, the lab and the course are 2 different courses. This is 3 credits, the lab is 1 credit, these are separate. So treat them as different courses. Okay, and anytime if you have any question about anything that I'm talking about, just raise your hand, don't wait for me to stop talking, you can just raise your hand anytime. And if you raise your hand, I don't see it, please, all of you just like point that out to me, I don't want any questions to be unanswered. Okay, so we're talking about measurement and problem solving in chapter 2. We talked about units, we talked about scientific notation, we talked about significant figures. Can anyone tell me what is the difference between scientific notation and significant figures? Yes?
Scientific notation is just a more efficient way of writing extreme numbers. And significant figures just tells you how precise that number is.
Exactly. So scientific notation, instead of me writing like 100 billion, right, or like really small number 10, 0.000000001, instead of writing that, I use scientific notation to write really big and really small or extremely large or extremely small numbers. But significant figures give me the precision of a number that I write. So if I have like more digits in a number, is it more precise or less precise? More precise, right? It means that I did the measurement really accurately, that I had that much of precision. But if I just tell you, 30, and it's not an exact, if it's the measurement, if I say, my weight is like 50 kilograms, it's just like an estimation, right? But if I say it's like 50.25, it's like a really, more accurate measurement. It has more significant figures. So this is the difference. So, I'm going to ask about significant figures and scientific notation in your exam. I'm just telling you now. So if you just pay attention now, you get that question right.
It's like the same as...
And here, we had some rules about significant figures, and if you had difficulty last session understanding this, now I'm going to explain them again to make sure all of you guys know that, So first rule, all non-zero digits are significant. Any number that you see, and they have like non-zero digits, those digits are significant. Good? And the second one, interior zeros, and here, your book explains zeros between two numbers are significant. So, 4.0208, these zeros between two numbers are significant. So far we learned that if we have just like non-zero digits, they are always significant. If you have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, these are always significant. If we have zeros between two digits, those zeros are significant. Good? And just ask me anytime if you have any questions. Trailing zeros. It means zeros to the right of a non-zero number that fall after a decimal point are significant. For instance, 0 in 5.10. Because it means that I did a measurement and I did that really accurately. So this 0 here means something that is significant. So 5.10 and 5.100 or like 100, these two numbers, mathematically these are the same numbers. But one of them has more significant digits or significant figures. These are like, has the same, these two words, digits and figures, significant digits, they have the same meaning. So if I ask you in the exam, how many significant digits this number has? How many? 3. Because we have like non-zero digits, they are for sure significant, we don't have to worry about them. And then we have like 0 after decimal point, which is significant. So how many significant digits this number has? 4, right? Because these zeros mean something when it comes after the decimal point. Trailing zeros that fall before a decimal point are significant. So if you have like decimal point and before that you have a 0, these zeros are also significant. So trailing zeros that fall before a decimal point, they are also significant. Okay? So if you have like a 0 also here, so like, I guess, 50.100. How many significant digits this number has? Are we comfortable with these 4 rules so far? Any questions? Okay, so now this is an example of a digit that is not significant, and that's why I have it highlighted here. Leading zeros to the left of the first non-zero number are not significant. They only serve to locate the decimal point. The decimal point. For example, the number 0.0005 has only 1 significant digit. So just remember an example. If you just remember that, okay, the number 0.00005 or like 0.005 or whatever example you want to give yourself or like memorize. So this number has only 1 significant digit because zeros to the left of the first non-zero digit are not significant. So far we talked about the numbers or like digits that are significant. This is an example of a number that, or like digits that are not significant. So just remember this example, and I'll give you this in the exam, and as I said, most students last semester had difficulty with this. So I'm just emphasizing a lot now that remember the number 0.00005 or 0.0001 or number 0.00007, all of these have only 1 significant digit. Because the first number, when you write that, the first digit, the zeros before that are not significant. Does that make sense? So just remember this example over here. Okay, trailing zeros at the end of a number but before an implied decimal point are ambiguous and should be avoided by using scientific notation. And again, this thing I'm going to give you in exam, this sentence, and I blank one part of it, maybe here scientific notation, because maybe here, ambiguous, or I tell you how many significant digits the number 350 has. So I'm going to ask you this in your exam, I'm telling you. Just like memorize this. For example, it is unclear if the number 350 has 2 or 3 significant figures. We can avoid confusion by writing the number as 3.5 multiplied by 10 to the power of 2 or 3.50 multiplied by 10 to the power of 3 to say whether it has 2 or 3 significant figures. And in the previous slides, previous sessions, I included some videos, mostly from Khan Academy, to refresh your memory about powers or like decimal points. So if you have problems with the mathematical part of the things, whether watch those videos or just email me. I schedule a Zoom meeting and explain those to you. But I can just devote so much time in the class, about a specific subject. Okay, any question about this slide? If you know the information here, you can answer the questions regarding significant figures and scientific notation and so on. Maybe.
One problem we were picking the lowest, like when we were eliminating options.
Now, I also want to refresh your memory about rounding. So if I have like a large number, like 1.567, or if, I ask you to do some measurements and then you do really precise measurement. Sometimes we don't want to have like all these digits after decimal, or like if you ask me, how much this book weighs, or like, you want to know the weight of your suitcase before you travel. If you go to the security and say the weight is like, it's like 22.5678. They're like, I don't care. What is roughly? Is it like below 23 or like 22 kilograms, or is it more, right? So sometimes you want to round numbers because we just don't care about the numbers after decimal points. And how we do that is that if the number that we want to round, depending on how many digits we want to round to, or like how many significant digits we want to have, how much accuracy we want to have, if this number here is 5 or more, we round up. If it's less than 5, we round down. So here, because this number is 3, we just like eliminate that. We write that 2.3. But here, this number is more than 5, so we add 1 to 3. So it would be 3.4. Or like 2.34 would be like 2.3. Does that make sense? Okay. And this is something really important, and I'm going to ask you whether in your quiz and your exam, that if you have multiple steps in your calculations, you shouldn't round your intermediate answer. You only round the final answer. Does that make sense? Okay. So these things were just like, yeah.
We're just doing the same thing in the parentheses.
Yes, previous session. But they were really important, and I realized some students had difficulty with those, so that's why I just paraphrased them or like repeated them rather. So now to see how much you learned, can you tell me what is this number, what would that be in scientific notation? Yes?
4.2 times 10 to the negative 5.
Okay, so who else wanted to say the answer?
I was going to say 7.
What's it? Okay. Any other answers? So how would we write this number as scientific notation? What is the first thing we do? Yes, decimal. What do we do with the decimal?
Make the number between 1 and 10.
Exactly. Remember, write the number between 1 and 10, and we don't round the number, because I didn't ask you to round this number. We just want to report the exact same number. So we don't round and write it between 1 and 10. So what would be this number between 1 and 10? 4.2. So already, if you just learned this, that you don't round the number, you write it between 1 and 10. Already, if I give you, I'm going to give you in your exam, your quiz, when you see that, already 2 of the options would be eliminated, and then you have to choose between 2. Because one of these I write like 4, multiply by 10 to the power of whatever. The other one, I might write like 4.22. You write the exact same number without rounding, and between 1 and 10. So I don't write 42, for instance, okay? Then I write it 10 to the power of something. Is this number really small or is really big? Really small. So the power would be positive or negative? Negative, okay. So already, if you just write till here, it's a good chance that you have the multiple choice question right. So make sure that you know at least till this part. So can anyone tell me, how do I write the power or exponent? Anyone?
Count zeros.
You count however many times you have to move the decimal over.
Exactly, we count the zeros and then we see how much we move the decimal. So I put the decimal here, right? 4.2. So, and then the decimal was here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is how I write scientific notation. Any question about scientific notation? Okay. A graduate cylinder has markings every milliliter, and these questions are just like copied from your self-assessment quiz in your book. And as I said, I didn't require the book, it's not mandatory, because I try to cover everything and then give you study guides, but you are highly encouraged to, have the book, purchase it, and then look at the problems. There are like so many examples. So in order not to plagiarize, I'm just telling you that these are from your book. So a graduate cylinder has markings every milliliter. Which measurement is accurately reported for this graduate cylinder? Can anyone tell me what is the answer and why?
21.232, so that's the most amount of significant figures.
So the second one?
Last one.
Last one. So what others? Okay, yes.
Would it be 21 because you want to round to the nearest marking on the cylinder?
Okay. So what else? Who else wants to?
21.
Okay.
I'd also say 21.
21.2.
The first one.
Why?
21.2 because it can be between 1 milliliter, 21 or 22.
Okay. So if we have like our cylinder, any other answers? So if you have like a graduate cylinder, right? And then has markings every milliliter. So it has like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on and so forth. So it can be like 1 milliliter, 2 milliliter, 3 milliliter, 4, and so on, right? So is it possible when I want to read that, right? Is it possible that I read like 20? So let's start with this one. Is it possible that I read this number?
No.
So what about this number? Is it possible that I read this?
No.
So now between these two, how many think the answer is like 21 milliliter? Okay, how many think the answer is 21.2? So for the ones who say 21, why is 21?
Because that's like the unit which you're measuring by. Like it only goes by milliliters. There's no smaller measurement which you can see.
Okay, so what is the rationale for the ones who say like 21.2? Yeah, you can just go ahead. Yeah.
21 is your for sure answer, and then the 0.2 is your estimated.
Okay.
It's like with your significant figures, the last number, it's always estimated. It's like you're just guessing on that one, so it's not. You don't know for sure that it's 0.2, but it's pretty close.
Okay. So what is your rationale?
That was like basically it, because it's like if it's not exactly, like if it's just slightly over 21, or it's like you said, you have to estimate, and it's like you try to go for like between like 21.2, but it also could be 21.3 or 21.1. So it just depends how close you think is to that line.
Okay. So this is a, what do you call it, mind-provoking question. So I'm going to give you this question. Yes?
I just wanted to say that the question you're asking is which measurement is accurate or incorrect.
Uh-huh.
So that's, use the word accurately, that's why I use that rationale to just get 21. Because you're going for the most accurate answer rather than an estimation.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to give you you guys this question as a homework, and then next session I'm going to ask you, what do you think is the right answer? And I ask you, to go refer to your notes or like read online or like your book if you have the book, and then tell me what is the answer to this question. Okay? So for the next one, how many significant figures are in the number 0.00620? Yes? Why?
Because the zeros before the first number aren't significant.
Uh-huh.
Going after it.
Okay. Is this clear why? So remember always this example, 0.00005, this number, how many significant figures it has? Right? So these zeros are not significant. These zeros here are not significant. But these zero here is significant, and digits are always significant. Any question? Okay, round the number 89.04997 to 3 significant figures. Can anyone tell me what is the answer? Yes?
9.1.
Point what?
1.
Okay. What do you? Any other? Yes?
It would just be 89.0 because the 4 is less than 5, so you don't want that.
Okay. Who else wants to participate?
I agree with what she said.
Okay.
I'm also in agreement, 89.0.
Okay, so how many people think it's 89.0? How many think it's 89.1? Okay, so remember, first of all, when we pay attention in the question that how many significant figures we want to have. And then remember that you should, when you want to write, like round the number to 3 significant figures, now you're dealing with like this much of the number, right? So here, this number is like 4. I just like made it highlighted, but it's 4, right? So is it more than 5 or less than 5? Less than 5, right? So we just drop it. So it would be like 89.0. Does that make sense? But if I would tell you that write it to 4 significant digits, so what would be the number then? If it was like 4, I guess I can do this. 4 significant figures.
9.05.
Right? Because the number was like, and then we would pay attention here. This number, this number that we want to drop, this one is more than 5. So we should add 1 to 4. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. That we said here. Go back. Any question about anything? Okay. Perform this addition to the correct number of significant figures. So when we work with significant figures, we had like multiplication, division, and we had subtraction and addition. So can anyone tell me in subtraction and addition, what would we focus on? Decimal points, yeah, or decimal places, exactly. What about multiplication or division? Significant figures, right? So here, how many numbers or digits do I have after decimal point? How many here? How many here? 2, 3, 2. And then I write numbers or digits after decimal point. And we choose the one that has least number of digits after decimal point. So our answer should have 2 decimal points, or like 2 digits after decimal point. Yes?
Oh, it's decimal points, not 2.
Yes, after decimal point, yeah. So here, how many digits do you see after decimal point? So is that the answer? What about this one? What about this one?
Yeah.
What about this one?
No.
So is that clear? So even if you don't do the calculation, so you should have a calculator in your exam. You can do this, mathematical operation, on paper yourself too. But you should bring a calculator. But even if you don't, just by looking the answers, you can eliminate the wrong ones and then answer the question correctly. So what about this one? Perform this multiplication to the correct number of significant figures. How many significant figures do we have here? 2 or 3? Right, all non-digit numbers are significant. What about here? And remember, always remember this example that I gave you. This number has one significant digit or figure. If you know that, this would be easier. So what about this number? How many significant digits it has? 4. Remember, the zeros that are between 2 digits are also significant. So how many significant digits my final answer should has? 2 or 4? 2. We always consider the lowest one, right? So here, how many significant digits do I have? How many significant digits do I have here? What about here? What about here? So which one is the answer? Right? So I don't even have a calculator. I don't even know what is the answer to this question. But I could just choose the right answer based off of the number of significant figures. Okay, any question about this? So let me go. Exactly. So here, like this example here, so I didn't include, but this was in the previous lecture slides. And if we have subtraction and addition, we focus on decimal places and just have the number with the lowest accuracy, which is the lowest decimal places, right? And then if we have multiplication and division, in that case, we focus on significant figures. So this is how we agreed to do the calculations, because if I have a measurement that is 50.2, the other that is 50, I guess if we want to deduct this number, the answer should have only, it shouldn't have any decimal points anymore, because this was, had the lowest accuracy in the sense, or does that make sense? Okay, so till now we just reviewed what we learned before, but again I wanted to emphasize on the concepts and refresh your memory. So now it may get a little confusing, but hopefully I can explain it well so you guys won't be confused. If we have all the mathematical operations, by that I mean multiplication, division, or subtraction, addition, right? So if we have those, how do we handle? So first thing to remember, never round your intermediate answers. So if I give you this in your exam, first of all, remember that in mathematical operations, do you know what is the main priority in general? If we have parentheses or power, and then multiplication, division, or addition, subtraction, right? If you have all of these operations, which one should I do first? Parentheses. Parentheses always comes first. What is the next one? Exactly, exponent or power, yes. What is the third one? Right. And what is the last one? Fourth, right? So now, if I give you a mathematical operation, you know that first you should do the parentheses, then you should do the multiplication. And in most of the calculators these days, if you just you can enter parentheses, so you don't have to worry about it. But if you have a really basic calculator, those small ones that you can just have the basic mathematical operations, and then you cannot do parentheses, first you should have 5.489 minus 5.01, have that answer, and then multiply that by rest. Does that make sense? But most of the calculators that I saw students have, they can just like put parentheses so you don't have to worry about it. So in your exam, when I give you this question, first, find the answer with calculator and don't round it at all. Good? And then remember that first you should deal with parentheses, then power if you had, and then multiplication, division, and then at the end, subtraction and addition. Okay, so what you do is that you don't round the intermediate answers, you do the parentheses first, and remember that when you're dealing with addition, subtraction, what do we focus on? Decimal point, right? And then we say how many numbers do I have after my decimal point? So how many numbers do we have after like 5.489 after this decimal place? How many do we have here? Right? So the answer here, when we write how many numbers should be after decimal place? 2, right? So your book did the calculation, and then the subtraction would be this, right? So here is the tricky part. You remember that you should write 2 numbers, or like in your head, you're like, okay, the answer of the parentheses should have 2 numbers after the decimal point. So it means that how many significant figures it has? 2, right? Is that clear what I just said? I need all of you guys' attention, because as I said, this can get a little tricky, but if you just pay attention, it won't be that difficult. So you do the subtraction, and you remember that you focus on decimal places. And then you count the number. You have like 3 digits after decimal points for the first number. For 5.01, you have like 2. And the answer should have like 2 numbers after decimal point. But when you put that in calculator, you get like 0.479. So you remember that basically it should be as if it is like 0.78. But you don't round it because we just agreed we don't round intermediate answers. Right? So you just like remember that you should have like 2 digits after decimal point. It means that how many significant figures the number in parentheses should have when we do the operation. How many? I asked the question. 2, right? Is that clear? So this number should have 2 significant digits because we have like 2 numbers after decimal point, right? But we don't round this number. We just remember 2 significant digits here. Is that clear what I mean here?
I have a question.
Yeah?
Are you saying since it's subtraction, it should have 2 significant digits or 2 spaces after the decimal?
So it should have 2 spaces, 2 digits after decimal place. Because we're working with like subtraction, addition, right? We're subtracting 2 numbers. So the number that we should write technically should have like 2 digits after decimal place. But we shouldn't round the number because we just agreed that we round the final answer to have as much as accuracy that we have. So although the number that we write here, technically it should be 0.48, right? Because it has like 2 numbers after decimal point. So we remember that we have like 2 significant digits, and we keep track of significant digits because we're dealing with multiplication afterwards. Right? So here you just write that here the answer for these parentheses should have 2 digits after decimal place because we worked with subtraction, addition. And you keep track of, you realize that, okay, it should have 2 significant digits, because then you should multiply it by some other numbers. But you don't round the number, because we agreed that we just round the final answer. Does that make sense, what I just said? So as I said, this can become a little tricky, and the students confused that, okay, we were working with subtraction, and now we're multiplying, or like, why did you write a 0.479? You should write 0.48, because we agreed we have like 2 numbers, digits after decimal point. So you don't round the number, but you remember that here you have like 2 digits after decimal place, because you worked with subtraction, and that number would have 2 significant digits. So you write it down because you're going to multiply it by some other numbers. Any questions? Yes?
So this having only 2 significant digits, this applies only to subtraction and addition, not multiplication or division?
So those ones, you individually, we're going to work on them next and count how many significant digits do they have. But as of right now, for the parentheses, we do the mathematical operation, because in subtraction or addition, we focus on decimal places, and we write the number that calculator gives you, 0.479. So you keep that as such, because we don't round the intermediate answers. But you remember that the result of the parentheses, if it was by itself, would be 0.48. Because you should write it with 2 digits after decimal point. Does that make sense? But then we go work with like multiplication. So how many significant digits do I have here? 3. How many significant digits do I have here? Right? And then how many significant digits do I have here? 4, 5, 2, 2, right? Because again, this is the tricky part. You have like 2 digits after decimal point. So the number that you write should have 2 numbers, 2 digits after decimal point. And since the number is 0.48, so this would be specific to each problem. If the number was like 0.01, it had 1 significant digit, right? So necessarily, because you have like 2 decimal points, the 2 digits after the decimal point, it doesn't mean that you have 2 significant figures. You write the number and then decide how many significant digits you have. Yes?
Can I just clarify for my mind here? So in the parentheses with the subtraction, you don't actually round it, but you round it in your mind to get the amount of significant figures.
Exactly. Yes?
Okay, so when you're looking at the initial, like, what you have in the parentheses with what you're subtracting, and you noted, like, there's 3 and then there's 2.
Uh-huh.
Are you, like, for how you know that it should have 2 significant digits, what do you, like, are you just going off of what the smaller number is?
So here, these numbers that I'm writing here, you refer to, right?
Yeah.
So the question was that, and I keep repeating the question when I record the lecture, and I listen to it, I'm like, oh, it's not obvious, what students were asking. So I apologize to everyone for that. So I try to repeat the question. So the question is that these 3 that I wrote here and these 2 that I wrote here, how did I write them, basically? Or like, are they significant digits, right? Was it the question?
It's like, which, like, you have the 3 and the 2, but then you say that, oh, never mind, I think I know what you're trying to say. With how the second one has 2 significant digits, the first one, the 5.489, that has 3 significant digits.
So this is the tricky part. When you're working inside the parentheses, you have subtraction. We focus on decimal places.
Yeah.
So I guess the better way of me writing this, it would be like 3 digits after decimal point. So we're not working with significant digits here yet. And then here I say that we have like 2 digits 2 digits after decimal point. And the answer of this parenthesis here, the result, I guess I changed the color to purple, or like, yeah, or indigo. So these results should have like 2 digits after decimal point. I mean, this is how we agreed to do things, right? For subtraction, addition, we focused on decimal places, or like digits after
What
decimal.
makes it two? Like, is there a rule that makes it two?
Instead of the three.
Do you pick like the lowest one like we were a couple slides before?
Like, why isn't it?
Are you picking the lowest between
The
three?
lowest, exactly. So we don't want to increase the accuracy of the result, or we don't want to decrease it. We just want to have the same amount of accuracy that we had,
Oh, okay.
right? So this is just the rule. Yes.
I guess I'm just kind of confused. Why are the numbers like before the parentheses, why did those have 3 significant figures, but the ones, or you see your 3 and then 4 significant figures, and then the ones within the parentheses, you're only counting the ones after the decimal point? I guess I'm just kind of confused.
Okay. So this is the part. I mean, I'm really glad that you guys, asking questions, and I'm really grateful for that because it shows that you guys care, and I love it. So let me try to teach this better. Let me have like this color, 6.78 multiplied by 5.90 multiplied by 89 minus 5.01. So we are asked to do this calculation in our exam. So as I said, I recommend that all of you just put this as such in calculator and then try round the final answer then, or like try to do the math then, because we don't round any intermediate answer. Okay, right? So can anyone tell me if I am having addition and subtraction, right? If I only had 5.489 minus 5.01. If I only had this, right, what would be the answer? I guess, let me tell you guys that if you put this number in calculator, you get 0.479, right? So if you just put this number, or just deduct these 2 numbers, you get that number. But what do you actually write in your exam? And when we deducting 2 numbers, what do we focus on? Decimal places. So we don't work with significant figures when we're having subtraction, addition. Okay? Good so far? And then here, we locate the decimal point. And then we say that how many digits, and you don't work with significant figures anymore, even if you have 0, even if you have something that is not significant. You work with decimal place. So how many digits do you have after decimal place? 3 digits we have after decimal point. What about here? After the decimal point, how many digits do I have? So 2 digits we have after decimal point. And then we choose the lowest number between the 2. You have like 3 here, 2 here. The lowest is 2. So how many digits the number should have after decimal point, your answer? 2. So here you have 3. How can I change this to 2? With rounding, right? So here the number is 5 or more, right? It's like 9. So how do I round this? 0. What? 48, right? So this is this part. So if I gave you this in the exam, this would be solution. Is that clear now?
Yeah,
Right?
I'm just saying, like, before the parentheses, why is it only significant after the decimal than where like right there? but when you were on top, you said all of the numbers were significant, like 6.78, all three of those were significant instead of what 0.78 being significant, like you were doing in the parentheses.
Because, you know, so that is another question. So basically here, if I write 6.78 multiplied by 5.903, multiply by, you know, so let me just first focus on these two. If I want to do this operation in multiplication and division, we focus on significant figures, right? Is that clear now? So here we have 3 significant figures. We don't work with decimal points anymore, right? What's that? Yes, this is kind of like the mathematical rules, you know, that we agreed on, or like mathematicians agreed on. So we still have the attendance, so if you just leave, you don't get the attendance. So I asked you guys, if you have class and you should run out, just take a picture and then complete this within an hour before I post the lecture. And you can also just do it now. We have like 1 more minute and it doesn't take you long. And if you're just like busy, don't want to do that, just email me that you were in the class, like just in the next hour.
Dr. Farsi.
Yes.
Do you want us to like make an announcement about what we were just going over? Because I think Sydney and I are both going to include that in our session.
Yeah,
plans
sure,
for
sure.
today. Okay.
Yeah. And your SI Pass leaders want to make an announcement.
Hey guys, really quickly, while you guys are doing the attendance, I know that this lecture is like a lot more confusing than the previous ones have. So I'm planning to cover the stuff that we talked about today in tomorrow's session. So my session is from 6 to 6:50 tomorrow. So if you're confused at all, please feel free to come and work on some of these problems together and try to get more of an understanding.
Yeah, and you can also give your feedback to your SI Pass leaders. It's totally anonymous and they can fill in. Yes.
I was just wondering, so if we have some subtraction of parentheses, and the lowest amount of digits after the decimal is 0,
Okay.
and then that answer is 0 point something,
Okay.
does our final answer have no significant digits?
It doesn't, it won't be having any number after the decimal point. So let me paraphrase. So your question is that if we have like 2 numbers that we're subtracting or adding to each other, and one of them doesn't have any decimal point, right? So your answer shouldn't have any number after decimal point because your measurement wasn't that accurate. Does that make sense? Thank you. Make sure to sign this by an hour before I post the lecture online.